Love in its truest essence is not a fairy tale or even a fleeting emotion. You know, it is an ever-evolving force that mirrors the depth of life itself. Yeah? And its beauty lies not in simplicity, but in its complexity. You know, the intertwining of emotions, growth, vulnerability, and even truth. The problem arises when we try to navigate love blindly. That is without awareness, without intention, or even without understanding. Now, when we treat love as a feeling to fall into rather than a path to consciously walk, then it becomes chaos instead of creation. But when approached with intention, then love becomes not something to fear, but something to live. You know, love's complexity stems from the meeting of two inner worlds. You know, histories, wounds, desires, and even dreams converging into one space. Now, without awareness, this collision creates confusion and pain. We mistake attachments for connection. We mistake projection for intimacy. We even mistake comfort for love. Love then feels like a battlefield, not a garden. However, when we become intentional, then love transforms. We begin to see it as a reflection of life. Sometimes it is messy, sometimes it is magical, but it is always meaningful. We start asking deeper questions. What is this love teaching me about myself? How can I love without losing myself? How can I allow another to grow while I also expand? You know, intentions turns love into a practice of presence. It teaches discernment. That is, to know when to give, when to hold space, and when to walk away without hate. You know, it teaches responsibility. You know, to not let our unhealed parts dictate how we treat someone else. It teaches patience. To understand that the rhythm of love is not always aligned with the speed of our desires. You know, when you approach love intentionally, then it stops being an escape from loneliness and becomes an extension of wholeness. You know, you no longer seek someone to fill your emptiness, but to witness your fullness. You know, psychologically, love without intention is a reenactment of childhood conditioning. Because we unconsciously seek partners who mirror our past patterns. Either our caregivers' affection, rejection, or even validation. And then we call it chemistry. You know, this blind repetition creates cycles of dependency and pain. Intentional love, however, arises from self-awareness and emotional maturity. You no longer react from wounds, but respond from clarity. You recognize your triggers, you communicate your needs, and you create boundaries that protect growth, not ego. You know, this transforms love from an instinct into an art. That is a mindful collaboration between two evolving selves. When love is conscious, it becomes a mirror that helps both people integrate their shadow and light. It's no longer about finding the right person, but about becoming the right energy. Spiritually, love is not just a human emotion. It is divine energy expressing itself through human connection. You know, it is the same creative essence that gives birth to galaxies. You know, flowing through the human heart as compassion, as union, and even evolution. When you love intentionally, You align with this divine rhythm. You stop trying to control love and you start co-creating with it. Fear fades because you realize that love cannot be lost. It can only be transformed. Even heartbreak becomes sacred. It becomes a process of purification that deepens your capacity to love again, to even love wiser and even freer. You know, to live love as life is to see every encounter as holy. Every meeting, every ending, every lesson as part of your soul's curriculum. You know, in short, love is complex because life is complex. And that's what makes both worth living. The danger is not in love's depth, but in entering it blindly. When approached with intention, love evolves from a temporary emotion into a continuous state of being. That is a mirror of growth, consciousness, and even divine expression. My people, heal. Heal.